morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I was at a reception last night, so my knees hurt and my voice is a little tired. But it was a very eye-opening experience into non-dilutive funding and partnerships with industry. And today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our command. Some of you know of us, and some of you don't. And that's part of the problem. Those that don't know about us, we want you to know more about us and ways that you can engage us and that we can work with you and partner with you to help our warfighters. Today when I talk about the U.S. Army Medical Research and Material Command, that's my command on which I work, I may abbreviate it as MRMC, Medical Research and Material Command, because it's a long word. I want to spend just a minute talking about our mission, because the mission of any organization, whether you're in industry, government, or nonprofit, should motivate you and drive what you do. And it does. The last word in there is warfighter. That's why we exist. We're faced with a complex world right now where we send our soldiers, airmen, and Marines everywhere in harm's way. We need to respond to their needs medically in a responsible way, but be very responsive. And how we do that is through creating, developing, deploying, and sustaining medical capabilities. That's a pipeline from creating, from the basic research, through developing, through getting things through the FDA. That's where my office works on the advanced development side, pushing products through the FDA, and also sustaining them and logistically managing them. Excuse me. There we go. And I just waved my hand and it moved. I don't know if that's... if you want to engage us, I think I can give some examples. One thing we can do is some basic research. We work with the FDA. We manage projects, but the bulk of what we do is through our partners, through industry and academic partnerships. Over 95% of all the medical capabilities that we have for our warfighters, we buy commercial off the shelf. Over 95%. We prefer to buy the products, not to develop them ourselves. We don't manufacture anything, but we have some S&T knowledge. We have an infectious disease capability, for instance, traumatic brain injury capability, and we have the physicians, nurses, and scientists that know what it's like in the battlefield. But we can't manufacture those products. We only sustain them as far as getting them to the field and making them durable and sustainable. But you, as both academic and businesses, we depend on you for your expertise with running clinical trials, with getting things through the FDA, and getting things to market. We're a piece of that market. We provide the military capability while you're often reaching for that commercial market. We have a military space that needs your help. Can I ask, who in here has been funded by the DoD for anything? Great. Could somebody tell me about how long it took you to get your grant or award? Anyone? 2 years. 2 years. And that brings me up to the next point. We have some challenges, and we hear your issues. 2 years or 11 months, 15 months is not a way to get things to the warfighter. Again, our purpose is that warfighter, and we don't want to tell them that, well, we hear you, and we'll get an award started in about 15 months, and by that time, it's a little too late, the way technology is moving now. So you've probably been funded through a contract, a grant, which is an assistance agreement or a cooperative agreement. We also have a CRADA, that's the third bullet there, the Cooperative Research and Development Agreement. That doesn't provide funding, but that provides a relationship with you. But those top three things are burdened for lack of a better term, with regulations. Now, regulations have a purpose. That's why they're there. When we look to procure something through a contract, we have to establish some regulations through the Federal Acquisition Regulation. But Congress, back in the late 80s, said we need to reach some other people by other means. There's a lot of regulations. So we were looking into other ways of doing business with you. We also realized we had problems partnering with you guys. We couldn't reach some small businesses and some non-traditional defense contractors because in order to get a contract from us, you need a cost accounting system, which is very expensive. Even some large companies, which I don't want to mention, but I do know them, we're partnering with them, but not through contracts because they don't want to waste their time trying to get a cost accounting system. It's very expensive. But in order to get a procurement contract, you need that, and there's reasons for that. We can't reach you guys that can't afford it or don't want to do that, so we need another way of doing that. Also, we need a better way of working with multidisciplinary teams. Now, we know intellectual property, we have our own, but we know you guys have that, and you guys need your capital, and you need to move your IP along. But we do need partnerships, and we need a negotiable pathway that we can work with you guys, with your business partners and academic partners, and work with us. We know there's academic institutions that can run clinical trials. We know businesses that can do the trial and have the product, and we know the small businesses that have that technology. So we want to work together. And right now, our acquisition strategies are not the ideal way of doing that we've seen. We also have been approached in the past with private sector funds. We've turned away because we're the government. The government can't take a check from a family of an injured warrior. We can't take a check from a foundation. So how do we do that? We also looked at joint ventures where we want to work with other government agencies as sponsors with non-dilutive funding and other countries. We do collaborate with other countries. Because of regulations, it's a little tough, so we're looking at better ways to streamline some of that. So we've looked at other transaction agreement. We're not the first agency to do this, but we were the first agency within the DoD to do it for a medical purpose. We at my command use a prototyping other transaction. It's for more advanced research. It's not basic exploratory science. It's usually what we call technology readiness level 4. It's been documented in a model, whether it's a live animal model or another demonstrated model. And we're not exploring anymore. We are taking a capability forward for a need. You may have 5 that you're trying to down select, but you know your area where you're going. What is an other transaction? It's best defined in law by what it is not. It's not a contract or a grant, so it does not have those regulations with it. Our contracting command can get a little nervous because we're the Wild West. We don't have any regulations. But we do have, there's some, but it doesn't come with the federal acquisition regulations. It doesn't come with the grant regulations, which is nice. We designed our own intellectual property, flexibility. I'll show you some examples of what we're doing with this idea in a little bit. But it's a way that we believe we can attract some of you guys to work with us and be not so apprehensive about the time it takes to get an award or about learning what we are about. So we set up an enterprise partnership. That's a partnership between the government and a consortium. The government may not be just us. It's multi-parties. I'll give you an example of how that is working. It can be multi-government agencies. It can even be a foundation from the government side, for instance, as sponsors. The consortium is a group of performers, those that are academic institutions, large and small industry, research organizations that are the performers, the technology expertise. You can also be a clinical research organization or experts with FDA regulations as part of this consortium. And we connect the government with that consortium through this other transaction. So it's not a contract again, it's this other transaction. So we can share information back and forth. So we set up the Medical Technology Enterprise Consortium about 2 years ago. Now we solicited this for competition for somebody to organize and run this nonprofit. They competed and they won it. There's 3 components I want you to take home about this consortium. They are a 501c3 nonprofit, so they can take philanthropic donations to use for military medical development. It's also a consortium. Right now there's 158 members. It's an open consortium that can keep growing and growing. You can come in and out. And we're connected with that group through this other transaction. There are no contracts involved in that, or it's not a grant activity. It's a different way of doing non-dilutive funding. These 3 areas provide a very, very flexible way to combine both public and private resources and to combine your expertise along with ours. We have flexible, negotiable ways of intellectual property that I mentioned. Also, different ways we can compete. We've already done this over the past year and a half. We've seen that we can compete through a simple white paper, we can compete through a full proposal, and we can compete through a commercial solutions offering, something that DIUX has done in this area. Its commercial solution offering is a briefing. Just this past summer, we had some companies compete through a briefing. They came to us, they briefed, they did a pitch, they were selected. We got companies to work together after that. Then we sit down at a table and work out the statement of work together. You can't do that through a contract or grant. And finally, this mechanism provides a streamlined acquisition process. I had a slide that touches on this, but I took it out. It's very confusing. To me, it's colors and everything. But if you think of a pipeline from S&T through creating, developing, testing it through the FDA, deploying it to market, and sustaining it. That pipeline in the government can take about, 5, 6 different awards. You start with S&T or grant, then you move with assistance agreement, then you move with the contract, then a different type of contract. Each of those, you wait, you compete, you wait and compete. Every time you compete for a contract, you can take 9 to 12 months just to get that together. Through this process is streamlined. You don't stop every time. Also, if the project or the technology is funded through this mechanism in the beginning, when it comes to manufacturing it for commercial use, we do not have to recompete that. We can sole source it to the technology owner, but procure it through a typical contract because we're in a different phase now, we're procuring it. So we don't have to waste time in competing it. If the technology owner was funded through this mechanism and they have the capability to manufacture it or one of their partners. So I mentioned a prototype. Fortunately, this was redefined this past January, and you can look this up on the internet. It's the DoD Guide to Prototyping Other Transaction. They define what a prototype is. Law does not. So our contracting office is always wondering, well, what's a prototype? Look at it, it's about anything. It can even be a way of manufacturing something. It can also be a piece of that system. You don't have to start the project with, I'm going to make this widget. I'm going to make a piece of that widget. And I'm going to get these other parties to help me make that piece of the widget. An example we have is, imagine, and we've started off this, creating artificial vision for enucleated trauma to the eye. We need electrical engineers, we need neurologists, ophthalmologists, optometrists, physicists. You need all these people. You need gaming people, people that can take digital signals and have them reach the brain. So we need all these different folks to work together, but different types of components that goes in together. We're now producing this through MTech, but we're starting with a demonstration that you can get a digital signal to the VTN, the ventral thalamic nucleus, or the occipital lobe of the brain. So that's just a piece of the subsystem. We're not asking them for 3 years to give us artificial vision. We're doing this by a piece process. And finally, it can be a proof of concept, but it needs to be demonstrated, technically or in an operational utility. So over the next couple of slides, I want to give you some current activities that we're doing, and then I'll follow up that with some opportunities for funding that we have coming up. We started this 2 years ago, well, about a year and a half ago, for a $20 million effort in regenerative medicine. This was the first effort that went through MTech. We provided a $20 million, and this regenerative medicine is a $50 million program over 5 years. We used fiscal year 15 and 16 funds for this, $20 million in this. We ended up funding 18 million of it, and private cost share came in with 11 million. We looked at this as a win-win. We're getting $30 million of work for $18 million. The performers in this group see it as we're getting $30 million for only $11 million. This solicitation to award to project announcement took 6 months. And we were able to announce the awards at a meeting after releasing the announcement in late winter. We announced the awardees in August at a military meeting. 1 or 2 of the awards had about another 2 months to negotiate some of their things. This was a new opportunity, so they had to understand some of the intellectual property or some of the royalty agreements in that. But we were very pleased with that. The second effort we went after was this brain-machine interface. And this is a 2-phase type of award. Just to start off, we've funded 4 projects, and the top 2 or 3 performers of that will continue to the next phase of that, and we're looking to probably combine those different performers into one. This Prototype Acceleration Award is a different mechanism. Again, the regen medicine, those projects were funded $6 million, there was an $8 million, a $3 million, so those were in the $1 million range. This Prototype Acceleration are projects to be funded up to $300,000. But the beauty of this mechanism was to use fiscal year ending funding. We can award these projects faster because it's not a cost reimbursable mechanism, which most projects in this are cost reimbursable, milestone based. This is not, it's smaller, and it was a result of meeting companies at large meetings at Bio International or Avamed or something that had a technology but no way for us to look at it or test it. We said, how about this mechanism? In late spring, summer, we often have funding that remains behind. We need a way to move it fast and for a real purpose. So we were able to work with 6 companies, fund about $3 million worth of work, and again, 1.3 million of this was private cost share. This just happened this past summer, so we're pleased with that. Another mechanism which we released in October was a multi-topic solicitation. If you're familiar with the broad agency announcement that most government agencies have, this is similar to that, except unlike a BA, we're not giving you a grant. We're giving you an other transaction agreement. And In order to receive a project, you need to be a member of MTech. I'll have contacts for MTech after this. That's the nonprofit. But you could solicit as a non-member. We offer, at the current time, we're currently evaluating those white papers. Those white papers are the first stage of acceptance, and then we'll accept it, some projects that are acceptable to the second phase. The second phase can be a full proposal. It can be a commercial solutions opening. You can brief us. And during that briefing, which we're already in the process of setting those up, you send a presentation, a small cost proposal, and any other information that we request. We sit down at the table, and together we work out that statement of work. This next one is really unique. It's the permanent vascular repair. This project award took less than 5 months to award. In March of last year, March 30th, we had an MTech membership business day in San Antonio, Texas, at the Southwestern Research Institute. We had one of our Army officers there who had funding and ready to fund work with a permanent vascular replacement. But our command wasn't sure the best commercial pathway. Do you use natural autologous, or are you using an artificial vascular system? So when we went down there in the morning, we spoke openly to the public, and in the afternoon, it was only for MTech members. Because they're MTech members, we're not bound by regulations. We can discuss various things that we're doing. Right now, you're not MTech. I can't tell you everything that we're thinking. But once you're in MTech, we're not bound by these regulations. We can talk more. So the Army officer, the program manager, sat down with MTech members that filled this space, expertise. They together worked up requirements for a solicitation. That was March 30th. He came back, took their requirements, what they can do on the commercial standpoint, mixed them with our military requirements, put out a solicitation. Second week in April, and August 15th, he had an award. And what he's able to do is start that off with about $1 million, and then 6 months later, add another $1 million. Meanwhile, the company brought in a couple of $1 million also. I want to point out the one in the middle here. This activity, the Joint Evacuation and Transport Operational Architecture, it's a complicated system about which we spoke about this at our membership day in March. All those asterisks indicate that. This is about doing patient evacuation from point of injury in Afghanistan, for instance, all the way back to a fixed facility in Germany or in the US. But we have the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, the Marines, helicopters, airplanes, ships, all this, and ground vehicles, trying to coordinate patient triage and evacuation. It's very complicated, and it's not working very efficiently. So this architecture they plan to do is, I'm a neuropharmacologist, I'm not an IT guy, so it's a little hard to understand, but it's a little bit of virtual reality, HoloLens type stuff about simulating and demonstrating the time to evacuate patients, giving their condition to the appropriate place, triage to evacuation. This project was funded through a solutions brief. We had companies that pitched their ideas. We got companies to work together. They came and met with us in Florida at a meeting. And in a private room, we discussed their statement of work, our needs, and together we made a fit to award this project over the initial steps of this project, which will take 5 or so years, but we'll bring in more performers as this continues to develop. The dengue human infection model is something else that is unique. This model brings in some Army intellectual property. The problem with the dengue vaccine is that It's very expensive. You have to test it in people. For instance, a large pharmaceutical company has tested it in Asia, and they're testing it in a young population. We need it for adult soldiers, but you have to test thousands and thousands of people, and it's very expensive. Well, at the RARE, the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, we have one of the 4 dengue viruses isolated to do a human challenge model. So you can inject a human with this, and you can test the vaccine that way instead of doing it through the standard epidemiological way. We need the other three dengue virulence built and documented. So this solicitation is currently in the works of being funded through a couple of pharmaceutical companies and an academic institution. And pharmaceutical companies have come to us and said, we need this challenge model. We can help because it's too expensive to do this vaccine in a large volume of people in Asia. So these are some upcoming opportunities we have. This is just a little bit. We'll have more this summer, but this is what I know about now or later this spring. Drug treatment for TBI. We released a pre-announcement in November so that 6 December we could get information about what the community can provide to us. This is so partly it was fairly rapid, but we wanted to know what's out there. We needed to brief a senior person in the government and the DOD about the capability, so we wanted some information back. We got that, and that information is helping us build this solicitation, which should be released in the next few weeks. If you haven't seen this, you can read a little bit about it on MTech's website, which I'll show you. What they're trying to do is to build a network of performers, a manager, consortium group manager that can manage a capability to bring TBI drugs to the clinic, to trials, while you actively are managing data, learning about how well that drug is. And you can move drugs in and out faster. We need people that are set up with clinical trial sites already, but we need people that may not have gotten involved in these trial sites yet, but have technologies that want to bring to the board. A board will sit within that consortium to kind of look at what drugs are coming in and out. And we are working with another government agency, the Office of Naval Research. They are working this iPredict tool. What they plan to do through the MTech is to fund this, again, it's this artificial intelligence thing about looking at the brain model of a warfighter and predict medical responses to it, given what the injury is. They want to bring experts around the world to a table. The idea of to compete to get about 10 experts to sit down and to work with Navy on how to move this through the pathway. After that, this group of experts can bring a bigger solicitation to bring that requirement forward to better handle a computational tool for injury model and getting treatment faster. This could help combine with the evacuation process that we're working through, that joint evacuation trauma system. Also, the regenerative medicine, too. I mentioned earlier we funded the $18 million. We'll be releasing this in February. This will be about at the minimum, about a $10 million effort going out, with some emphasis on nerve. And again, but for manufacturing, standardizing the manufacturing of regenerative medicine technologies. I know this is just a few days away. I just heard about this 3 days ago. The iPredict will have an open webinar at this time. on January 12th, where MTech will discuss with the Navy, those that sign up for the webinar, they'll discuss their needs, what they need to do, and what it will be looking like in the spring for what they want to fund. Our third annual membership day will be in April at the Mayo Clinic. We've done one in DC. We did one in San Antonio, Texas. This one's at Mayo. Our membership day is typically at a member organization site, and this one will be bigger. We're planning for 2 days. And like we did in San Antonio, what happens is the first day or the first morning, we brief openly to the public. We had quite a showing last year from private groups, but also government folks come to learn more about it. And then in the afternoons and later in the event, we have closed session with MTech members only, where we can discuss more details and hear what you have to say, getting some requirements built. Something outside of MTech that just came up about 2 weeks ago, we plan to have an Army Medical Industry Day this summer sometime through the National Defense Industrial Association. If you guys heard of them, they do some work with SOCOM, and we have a little, somewhat of a relationship with them through an agreement. We're looking for telemedicine, robotics, and VR, and soldier performance enhancement technologies. What's out there? What can industry help us do? We feel this technology, as strange as it is, it can move a little faster, at least for telemedicine and robotics right now. As you know, as you may have seen in the news, our command that's far steps above my commanding general at the Pentagon, they're looking to get telemedicine and transport telemedicine into the DoD. We know that we likely will deliver drugs first via automated transport, but we'd like to be delivering patients back via automated transport also, which will save our manpower and probably be a lot faster for our patients. These folks here at NDIA can answer those questions about this future meeting if you'd like that. Now, I also have Stacy's card to learn more about MTech, to learn about what it becomes to be a member, and to attend our meeting in April. You can contact Stacy. She's the executive director of the nonprofit. There's their website. And also, we as the government post links to our solicitation activities on FedBizOps. That'll link you to the MTech. It'll have a synopsis of it, but it'll link you to the MTech website. And finally, I'd like to quote Henry Ford is, it's not just coming together and keeping together, but working together is success. And we want to work with you guys responsively, but not with so many regulations that possibly through this OTA, we can hear what you can do for us and you can hear what we need from you guys. So that's all I have, and I'm welcome questions. Thank you. Yes?
Can you talk more about the range of size of awards and how they're set? How do the
Okay.
award focus areas and the award amounts get determined in MTech?
Okay, she asked about how the different award amounts, how awards go and how they are set within MTech. The awards range from, it depends on the solicitation and the government needs, for instance. That small prototype and acceleration was the only one where that and the brain-machine interface, those two were the only one where we limited around a $300,000, $500,000. Other than that, they've been fairly open. Regenerative medicine does not have a cap, neither did the multi-topic solicitation. We do sometimes, we work with the community for the regen medicine, for instance. It wasn't necessarily our decision to keep that amount open. We sat down and developed those requirements from a consortium of industry and academic experts who advised us on what we think. We didn't want to limit it, but we were able to fund projects, like I said, up to about 6 or 7 million. 2 projects were funded at about a 5 million, and they brought in about 5.2 million of corporate cost share. So that project was over $10 million from the fact that they brought in some funds. The awards typically, that's a good point. As far the awards can be faster for one reason. MTech members have a base agreement with the nonprofit. So that base agreement streamlines the negotiation process. You've already negotiated some things, intellectual property, for instance, that could be fixed by then. Your royalty agreement could be fixed by then. So when you do receive an award, we don't have to do that. And you do still have animal regulations and human use regulations. This doesn't get away from that, and I don't think we would want to do that anyway. Oh, and projects go from 1 year to 4 years, I think. Yes.
Are you open to other areas besides the ones that you listed if we propose something that we think would be helpful for soldiers? Could we help?
Yes, she asked if we're open to other areas beside what I've posted, if you think something's advantageous to the warfighter. Yes, we do. Currently, we do not have a open solicitation year-round. We were thinking about doing that. Our multi-topic solicitation was just like the BA. We may go in that direction, but we kept it out for 90 days. And actually, we extended it another 30 days. But we kept it at, so it was about 120 days we kept it out to see what it was like, to see the responses we would get. So we will go in that direction, we believe. Also, there's other things I had, at MTech Membership Day, for members, you would hear about other things. But right now, they're not releasable to the public yet. So there's some other things. But if you can imagine the scope of what we do at my command, which I have not give command briefing, I didn't know if that was appropriate here, but we span the gamut from brain trauma, psychological health, to bone injury, tissue regeneration, products that can, for transport, things you put on an ambulance, a litter system, a mosquito net, a lot of things. What we do also is, for instance, if it's a drug, we usually handle that. If it goes on an ambulance, if it's a medical device, we have to have it tested for airworthiness. It has to fly in a helicopter up to 14,000 feet in Alabama at our testing site. So we work with you on that. So we do have PTSD in mind. We're still trying to target that, but there'll be other areas we're looking for. Thanks. Anyone else? Oh, yes.
With the new FDA DoD law that was recently passed, do you anticipate it changing how you both fund and develop combat medicine drugs?
Yeah, we're hopeful. That's the emergency use authorization you're talking about? Yes. It had been really for chemical and biological defense, pretty much. It is opened up, but I cannot speak for the FDA. We're the DoD, and we do not have a special relationship with the FDA. We do have a relationship. We are positive, and we think it will help. Hemorrhage control, or hemorrhage, is the leading medical problem we have on the battlefield. And it typically gets significant funding along with post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury. That could be used in that area, but we don't know for sure. But we're hoping. My boss, who is the principal assistant for acquisition, he's our milestone decision authority. He approves all the milestones when you go through, all the way through product launch. So he's also the sponsor's rep to the FDA, to our Surgeon General. He feels confident that this new ruling will help us, but we don't know for sure yet. Thank you. Okay, if there's no more questions, I appreciate it. I'll be over here and I have some meetings with you guys. Thanks. Yeah.